Hi guys, Oliver here from Spitfire Audio. Please stay on, we've got something very exciting for you today. We've got a guest composer running through his piece, A Strange New World, that is written for our BBC Symphony Orchestra Professional library. He's a young and very talented composer. He's a great friend and part of the Spitfire family. You might know him through Christian Henson's YouTube channel as well as his own channel, so please make sure to subscribe and support him. Without further ado, Dan, take it away.
Thanks, Oliver. Hi, my name's Dan Keane. I'm a composer, producer, musician and YouTuber based in the southeast of England, and welcome to my home studio where for the next few minutes we're going to be talking about a demo that I composed for the BBC Symphony Orchestra Professional library, a piece of music called A Strange New World. Now, as you can probably imagine, this title is pandemic inspired, and I was really inspired by people like Bernard Herrmann, those sort of noir films of the day where they just sort of throw horror right in your face, and this is almost like an overture, I would say. So I'm using just the BBC SO with a smattering of the Bernard Herrmann composer toolkit in there as well, alongside the orchestral grand piano. Now today, with my composer hat on, we're going to be talking mostly about the arrangement, how I wrote the piece of music, and then later we'll be talking about the kind of production techniques that I used just to sort of tighten things up and make it a little bit more kind of commercially ready. So first of all, let's just jump into the Logic project, and I'm going to show you the piece of music as it sits on the website now. So the first thing I want to do is just show you that final chord, because it sounds very ominous, but actually it's very simple. So if I just play you the strings on their own, it's just a G major chord at the bottom. Now if I play you the brass, but without the very low notes, is an F sharp major chord. So two things that sound very nice on their own can sound really horrible if they're just a semitone apart. And the thing that really sort of ties it all together, for me at least, is this low brass note. You've got a G in the bass, you've got F sharp major right at the top, and then you've got this G major chord that only resolves partway into that. So it's still a little bit ominous, and then it will just gradually sort of notch into place. bitonal, you can't go wrong with it. So I am a bit of a piano sketcher. That's how I write all of my music, to be honest. And I do talk more about this on my YouTube channel. Links are down below if you want to check out my own channel. I'm going to show you just how I started this piece of music, and you'll see that actually I haven't done a huge amount really to sort of embellish it. If I now just play you what it became. Almost all of the lines are there, the main melody is there. That's actually what I first started with. I said, what does that melody want to be played by? Well, for me at least, it was going to be the real high trumpet. So I mentioned that I used the Bernard Herrmann library, and if I just play you both of these together, you'll hear how they interact. So they're playing in octaves there. Something that I really like about the BBC SO is how sort of rounded and warm it sounds. It's really kind of air-like. If I actually have a look at the mic position that I used, I think it was just mix 1 plus some of the close mic. So I think personally that the sonority of brass changes more sort of dramatically than any other instrument when you vary which mics you're using. The close mic really captures that kind of brassy metallic sound, whereas the ambient microphones are going to capture more of the sort of air and the kind of, I guess, the grandeur of the room. Now, in this Bernard Herrmann library, this was recorded in a smaller space at Air Studios, and so what you're getting, even with the tree microphones, is still a very up-close sound, and then combined with the Bernard Herrmann sort of estate, the way that they've sort of recorded this library, you really get that kind of raucous edge. I'm just going to I'll play you what this sounds like on its own, just the Bernard Herrmann, and then I'll show you what it sounds like with and without with the rest of the brass. Okay, and now here it is all together. Really does add to that sense of drama. Now, I did actually try using a little bit of distortion as a sort of sidechain thing, and that did actually work pretty well, but I found in the end that the Bernard Herrmann toolkit sort of provided everything I needed. Now, there is a little bit of the Spitfire orchestral grand piano. This was recorded in the hall at Air Studios, and I'm using a lot more of the close mic than you might imagine. This is a sort of positioned orchestral piano, so it sounds like where it would normally be, but I just needed to capture a little bit more of the articulation there, because there's a nice little solo that happens here. Now in the EQ, I'm actually just boosting the lower frequencies. I find that with this recording, it sounds great and it sounds well balanced, but if anything, it's probably got more upper mid-range than low range, so I just wanted to capture that a little bit more clearly. Now, here you might have heard just now a little legato transition. Now that makes all the difference. What we're really doing is we're sinking into that D flat major second inversion chord. The entire arrangement changes at that point. Now, if I were to take that first violin and change that note, not from 1, but up to 127, it's not going to do a portamento slide, it's actually just going to rebow the note. Now that sounds nice, but I think you'll agree, having that control just gives it that kind of quite romantic sound. If I combine that now with the rest of the orchestra, it does make quite a big difference. Now, I was quite sparing with the woodwind. I tend to find with big orchestral pieces like this that I like to use them quite selectively, and here I'm using what I actually wrote for the piano sketches, just orchestrated for the woodwind. Now, because I wanted to capture the precision of all of those little articulations, what I've done is I've used a combination of the tree and close microphones. I'm actually using the close 70% and above for some of these. And if I didn't use it, I would still get the performance of it, but in the context of all the harmony here, I just wanted to make sure that everything was precise. So it does have the tendency to rear its head there. I'm actually quite selective with the mixing here. I've ducked out a little bit in the mid-range and then boosted the upper mid-range by only half a decibel. Now in this next section where we've got the tremolo, really it's just between the first, second violins and the violas, but you'll notice here that there's also the cellos, and what the cellos are doing is they're playing the viola line. If I play it to you without the cellos, sounds perfectly nice, but if I add the cellos as well, it just adds a little bit of depth there. Something that you probably won't notice, but definitely is there. And when the cellos then come in with this tune, it sort of sets the stage, as it were. I should say here that I have sort of pulled out the cellos as soon as that melody starts, so it would be playable by an orchestra if they were to play it. Now you'll notice here that for the most part with the first violins and the violas I'm using just the traditional tremolo, and then with the second violins I'm using the consordino with mutes. And it does make a huge difference. This sound is really sort of soft and has that nice upper mid-range. It's just got a slightly different sort of harmonic series. So I would really recommend exploring those various articulations if you've got the BBC SO, and just explore what works best. For me at least, I find that the first violins and the violas work really well together. The second violins work really well as a little gel in the middle. Now this next section I would describe as almost a little bit like a shepherd tone. We've got this thing that continues to rise, but as you'll notice, when it gets pretty stressed out, it actually starts to rise higher than some of the other instruments. So if I just show you the violas and the cellos here, this is an interesting sort of arranging technique that I like to use. I'll sort of play with it in tandem. From this point on, the violas are actually at the bottom and the cellos are at the top. Now if we combine that with the other strings as well, it really adds to that sense of building. So here, the lowest note of those upper strings is actually the violas. That's the cellos up there, so they really are high. Now something that I think really heightens that sense of drama is when you have a bass line that goes in the opposite direction, it's going down. So here, now this bass line is supposed to mimic the melody that we heard earlier, and I've combined that with the lower brass as well. Now when you've got harmonies that move around in such close sort of movements like this, sometimes the best thing is just to orchestrate those parts for full orchestra by just being selective. So you'll see that with things like the oboe line and the first violins, they play the same thing, and with the clarinets and the second violins, they play the same thing. So this is a way for us to sort of add the sonority, the timbre of those woodwind instruments without sort of clouding the harmonic language. It gets pretty busy towards the end here anyway. Now I would say that the brass help add the most, and in a similar way, if we look at the trumpet part and then combine that with the first violins, it's sort of moving in harmony. That adds the sense of tension there, but you'll have seen before here, it's actually playing the same part. Now, I've actually used the tubular bells a little bit here. I just think it adds to drama so well. That really sort of, I don't know, it suggests that it's about to arrive. And if you notice at the beginning of the piece as well, I've actually used that here too. A little bit of Big Ben there. And here I'm just using mix 1, but I've really boosted those upper frequencies to get the sound of the hammer hitting. Now in all of the percussion here, I'm mainly just using mix 1, and I find that it actually works really well. Now I know Christian's created a video already for the Spitfire channel about how core could be the library for you, and I think in a lot of cases mix 1 works really well. I've enjoyed having access to the other mic positions, but mix 1 does a really good job. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about my production. Something that I really like about the BBC SO is that it's very well balanced. So the strings tend to sound sort of what you'd imagine them to be in relation to the brass and the woodwind. So, as I say, didn't actually take too much mixing. For the most part here, if I were to sort of stem this out, I'd be doing sort of individual bits of processing on the brass longs and shorts. But for this, I actually just used my main track stacks. So this whole template was adapted from the template that's available on spitfireaudiothepage.com. So I start here with the Waves CLA2A. I really, really like this compressor. It's really gentle, but sort of offers that sort of transient support. So if I've got this, if I just play solo here, at times we're hitting about 5 dB of gain reduction, but because the CLA2A is quite slow to respond, I don't notice it sort of stifling the brass too much. Then I've got a channel EQ here where I boost the low range, sort of cut out the mid range, and then boost the high end. But again, you can see I haven't had to do too much here, and what I've found really with the BBC SO is that because it's really cohesive already, I don't actually have to do too much in the way of automation either. You can see I'm kind of boosting things where need be, I'm kind of pulling things away just to help the general arrangement, but I wanted this to sound like it was all recorded in one room. There certainly isn't a hybrid score. Now if I were to look at the woodwind now, you can see that I've got a little bit of channel EQ, and I'm just cutting out the kind of 1K range. If I just play with the 1K, you'll hear it. Just a little bit nasal, so I'm pulling that away by about 2 dB, and then I'm boosting the high frequencies here. So this is capturing some of the rasp that you might hear out of the reeds, but also the key noises as well, just to add to the realism. Now if I go to my strings, again I'm using the CLA2A by Waves, and then I'm also using the channel EQ. Here I'm cutting out about 2.5K, cutting out the mid-range, and then I'm boosting about 14K just to compensate for that. So it's nice and crisp, but it's also not too piercing. It also really benefits the high notes here in the tremolo and the sound of the bow as well. Now in terms of the percussion, I'm actually using a combination of channel EQ from Logic and also the SSL compressor by Waves. Really, really like this compressor. It's got a 10 millisecond attack and then an auto release at a ratio of 4:1, and I just find that it works really, really well. If I play this bit here, you'll see I'm not even really reducing very much gain, but the character of that compressor really helps a lot. Now, in terms of my master bus compression, I really don't use very much at all, about a dB or so of gain reduction, and then I'll use a little bit of EQ just to give it a little smile. I tend to add a bit of tape. You'll see here that I use the J37 by Waves, just to help sort of bring up those upper frequencies, and then I'll be using the L3 multi-maximizer, the limiter, that just helps bring things up a little bit. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it to be useful. Thanks again to Spitfire Audio for allowing me to come on here and show you my piece of music, to peek behind the curtain a little bit. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I do have my own YouTube channel, so if you did enjoy this content, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel. It's just Dan Keane Music. Until next time, stay safe and stay well.